Okay, so I'm here at UK Detailing with Ian Seeley, and we're going to cover how to wash and maintain and protect your soft top, or rag top as I call it, roofs.
So once you've actually got any proofing on there, you don't want to get it soaked in shampoo or anything with your weekly wash. So you want to basically just dry vacuum it. That's just going to take off any dust, any pet hair, or anything that cat sits on there.
Almost like a carpet then.
Exactly, yeah. So just to keep it clean every now and then, and just like your house carpet, you don't want to wet vacuum that once a week.
Yeah.
So otherwise you'll spend all day with your doors open waiting for it to dry.
Exactly.
But maintenance-wise, going forward on a yearly basis, it's worth giving it a deep clean. So you're going to wash it out with some fabric cleaner, or in our case, an all-purpose cleaner.
Yeah.
Get it nice and dry, and then give it a bit of proofing as well. It's important to know that waterproofing on modern fabric roofs doesn't stop. It's not going to affect whether your car gets damp or wet inside or not.
This is really important, actually. I didn't know this. So I always thought if you're putting a waterproof on it, that's going to waterproof your roof. The roof is waterproof.
The roof's also, you've basically got fabric over the top of a rubber membrane on there. So the rubber membrane is what stops the water going through. The fabric on top of that, it's a little bit, it makes it look nicer, but it adds a little bit of proofiness of its own right. So
it's like a canvas, isn't it?
Exactly, it's canvas top. So if you were to look inside this, I'm going to open it up right now, but it's kind of shiny on the underside of it. Unless you've got sort of an older roof like this, or if a cat sat on there and starts putting its claws through there, something got some very minor pinholes in there, the rubber membrane is going to stop water getting in. What you're doing when you're putting a proofing agent on this is you're stopping water sitting on the roof. You're stopping the algae growth in there. You're stopping getting mould and the sort of funguses that grow on there. Keeping the colour nice, stopping any UV damage to it. If you've got those little pinholes in there, that's when the water sitting within the fabric for too long is going to start penetrating through. It's going to permeate that membrane and go through. So that's really the only practical benefit of waterproofing, is to stop any tiny things getting through. If you don't waterproof your roof, it's not going to start leaking unless you've got some big holes in there.
That's an important point. Okay guys, so now we're actually going to get on with it and show you the procedure.
Okay, so a little walkthrough of what equipment you're going to need. It's a brush. When you're selecting your brush, it's trying to get that Goldilocks zone. So you don't want something that's too soft, because all that's going to do is rub around on the surface, create a lot of foam, and not actually work the product into the fibres.
Right.
You don't want something that's too hard. You feel that one?
Yeah.
It's quite rough, because that's just going to scuff up the foam and possibly actually put some damage onto the fibres themselves.
Right.
You'll see a lot of these rotary brushes here that people will chuck onto a rotary polisher or a drill.
Yeah.
The problem with these, they're very effective at working it into the fibres and cleaning it, and you'll get a lot of muck out of them. But when you're spinning this round at such a high speed, the centre of that's going super fast, and what that's going to do is going to pick up the fibres, it's going to spin them around in one place, and you're going to end up with fabric pilling, which isn't ideal, and that's damaging the fabric long term. So try and avoid that if you can help it. I'm going to use something, one of these, which is a Tampica brush. That's cactus hair. You can feel that.
Brush.
Yeah, it's soft, but it's got quite stiff bristles still,
yeah.
So it's not going to damage anything. It's going to work the cleaner into the fabric, try and drive out any trapped in dirt, and it's still going to foam up quite nicely, which is going to lift it out a bit better as well.
Fantastic. So Tampica brush, guys, we'll put a link for this in the description if we can find one, and that's the key point, that you're probably better off doing this by hand than using the drill bit.
Yeah, it's not a massive surface area to cover, so you're not saving a hell of a lot of time using a machine. You can use these on a dual action polisher, and it's a little bit kinder, but you're just going to get you're not going to get a lot of rotation out of it. It's going to be a lot of spinning on the spots. Okay,
so that's brushes, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the chemicals.
Yeah, cleaners. At the end of the day, it is just fabric, so you don't need anything particularly specialist for this. Something like an APC or any fabric cleaner, interior fabric cleaner used for your carpets, is absolutely fine. Only thing to be aware of is what the surrounding materials are. So if you've got any aluminium trim or anything like that around the roof rails, don't use anything highly alkaline, because that's going to turn it all milky and horrible. So just be aware of sensitive surfaces you've got when you're selecting your chemical. But as a rule, any APC, this is NV Car Care APC, diluted down about 50 to 1, I think, just so it's got a little bit of cleaning power, but it's nothing too aggressive, so you can rinse it off nice and easily.
Right, so the key bit that I was taking away from what Ian was saying is that it's an interior safe, so it's a fabric safe, a all-purpose cleaner.
Yeah, try and avoid things that have got optical brighteners and things like that in there, because that's just going to leave stuff behind, but generally it's going to get rinsed away.
Yeah,
so
that's important. So the product you're using to clean it is going to be coming out of the fabric, and there's going to be nothing left behind with this process.
Yeah. The other thing to note is just, as with any kind of fabric cleaner, you do your little test patch if you're using something you haven't used before. You could be using something with oxidizing bleaches in there without knowing it if you're using a generic fabric cleaner. So just test it before you do the entire roof. It's much easier to fix one little patch than it is to fix or replace an entire roof.
Yeah, that's always an important point. Test spot first, guys.
Okay, first things first, we're just going to dampen down the roof a little bit. Just using the pressure washer because it's an easy process.
And this is the yearly deep clean procedure we're showing you here, guys. Okay.
Make sure all the windows are closed first.
Yeah. Okay, so the gloves are on.
Then we're just going to nice even spray across, trying to breathe anything in.
Yeah, I'm in the firing line it.
And you really do have to saturate it up. It's worth really putting a lot in there just so it soaks through, has a chance to penetrate all of the fabric. One other thing to note, it's not present on this hood, but on a lot of things like Audis and Saabs, you'll find that there's almost a grain to the fabric. It's worth, on those, just trying to follow that grain, because then you're actually getting in between the fibres a lot better. This one is just a really, really thin pile weave, so it doesn't matter with this one, we can go left, right, up and down all over the place, but all we're trying to do is just work it in. We're not looking to generate lots of foam, but
that's a really important point, guys, is that, you know, you might see kind of cleaning this isn't about making a foam fest, it's about doing what's best for the fabric. So, you know, that's it.
So we're getting a little bit of foam up there, but actually it's not relying on the foam to bring anything out.
No.
When using the brush, just try and protect these sort of areas, otherwise you're just going to put little tiny scratches in.
Yeah.
You wouldn't wash your car with the brush, so try not to get it on the when you're doing your roof with one.
You can see the brush is absolutely ideal because it's not kind of sticking, it's not, you know, you can see the brush giving when you're going over the fabric as well, so it's good.
Exactly.
To get yourself one of those.
The other good thing with these Tampicas is they are hygroscopic, the fibres themselves, so they will actually hold a bit of water in them.
All right. So it's it's not synthetic material.
No, it's cactus.
Cactus. Oh wow.
If at this point you see a load of green and brown coming out, then you've got quite a bit more dirt in the fibre tracks than you think, so it's probably worth doing sort of 2 cleans on it. So you do the first clean just to get the worst of it out, then just go over it again with another clean just to get the last remnants.
Right, and it's important, we were talking earlier on, that you don't need to do any sort of specific disinfecting generally. But Ian was talking, you can add a tiny bit of tea tree oil, can't you?
Yeah, tea tree oil's a natural fungicide and antibacterial, sort of a bacteria killer. So if you find you've got algae in there and you're worried it's going to carry on recurring, you can put a little bit of tea tree oil into some water, spray that on there afterwards, and just leave that to dry. So that's going to kill off anything that's in there, and then you can go ahead and improve the fabric afterwards.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're at the phase now where it's ready to be rinsed off, yeah?
Yeah, just rinsing it off. You want to go quite gentle if you are using pressure washer. If you just want to use the stream out of a hose, you can do that. It's going to take a lot longer to get everything out. You might have to help push it out with a brush. You can use your pressure washer as long as you take a couple of precautions. The last thing you want to do is get too close, because obviously there's quite a bit of push comes out of these. So if you are at this sort of distance, you're going to end up putting lines into the fabric. It's going to mess with the pull of the fabric. It's going to puff it all up and it's going to look awful. Too far away and it's going to do exactly the same thing as a hose. So you want to try and find that point in between where the pressure washer is just starting to almost push back. So you know it's got a little bit of force behind it, but it's not so much that it's going to damage anything. So it's the difference between that, which isn't going to do a lot, and this, which you can see is cleaning the dirt off of the concrete. So around about 30 to 40 centimetres is ideal for just rinsing away.
So it's always going to be more than the foot. So probably about 2 feet. You're saying roughly.
Err on the side of caution is what I'd say. If you go too close, then you can damage the hood permanently. So you better just going a little bit further away and taking a bit more time.
Okie dokie.
And the good thing is with this sort of pattern, you can actually push all the dirt and the water, the soap out of the fabric as you go. So
that's the aim of it. Get rid of all of that detergent.
Try and work in overlapping lines on this as well, because then you won't have little patches of dirt left behind. And again, if you're doing one of these vehicles that have got that grain pattern in the roof, instead of going front to back, just try and follow that grain. That's a natural line of the roof, so you're always going to have lines in that direction anyway. So if you do get a little bit too close, it's not going to show anything much.
So how do you know when you've rinsed it enough?
Okay, so you know it's all rinsed out when the water's coming clear off there. You've got no more algae or anything like that, no more soaps coming out. So just carry on rinsing away. Once it starts to go clear, then you're fine. Worth noting as well, if you're doing this on a hot day, while you're going, is to carry on rinsing down the car all the way to the bottom. So otherwise you're just going to wash everything that was on the roof onto your car paper. So do it before you've done your main wash, but if you're on a warm day, just carry on rinsing it all the way just so it doesn't dry onto the paint.
It's all been rinsed off, the APC is out of it. The next step is?
The next step, if you've got it, is wet extraction. If you haven't got it, you can just let it dry off naturally, or you can run a towel over the top just to pull out most of the moisture. Just helps speed up the drying process, because when we do this pressure, we try and turn things around inside of a day. So we need it bone dry before we put any kind of sealants or anything like that on it. So
that's a really important point, guys. We'll move on to talking about protecting it later, but you have to, if you're going to protect them, you have to do it when it's dry. So this is going to help get the water out. That looks great.
So now if you're washing your car, is now the time to give it a proper wash off, get it dry, and for this we're going to get it inside. We can get it under the fans, get it dried nice and quickly, and look at putting some sealant on.
So now the car is inside, the roof is dry, and we're going to move on to the protecting.
Yeah, we've got a couple of options with protection. There's loads of fabric sealants out there, and all of them will do what we want them to do, which is just to protect the actual fabric pile on top. Couple of differences in sort of the makeup of them. You've got things like Renovo, that's a water-based sealant. Plus side is it works really well if you're using their dyes, if you're trying to darken down your roof. It lasts around about, well, I don't want to quote it, but we've seen it last around about 18 months at a time, which is pretty decent for in between, so you've got sort of a 6-month overlap before you have to reproof it again if you're doing it once a year. Downside is it does take ages to dry unless you've got a really hot sunny day. So you really want to be applying this around about midday for it to be ready to go by the end of the day. If you have any issues in between, then you can't really force it to dry without using something like an IR lamp at a bit of distance.
So at least 4 hours, you're saying?
Yeah, it depends on the conditions outside, but yeah, that's going to be takes the longest to dry.
Okay.
You then got things like Gtechniq i1.
Yeah, it's a very popular product.
It's a very popular product, and I've used the previous version of this for a long time doing fabric roofs. They've brought out this anti-back one as well, which is also it's only going to add a little bit more protection. The only thing I've noticed with this is if you don't shake it up, you get a sort of a white chalky residue in it, which a lot of people who haven't shaken it up notice afterwards their roof's got this chalky residue on top of it, which you can just you can wipe it away, you can vacuum it off, so it's not the end of the world, but just something to be aware
of. You get that if you over apply too much of it, do you?
I don't know if it's over application. With all of these, it's very important to saturate.
Oh, right, okay.
You do have to put a hell of a lot on there, otherwise it's just going to sit on the top and not do anything for the fabric underneath.
So you want to soak it in there as well.
You really want to soak it through. It doesn't matter so much on something like this with such a short pile, but on things like Fiat 500s where you can lose yourself in the pile on those, you do use a lot of product. So for something like this, I'd say a 500ml of this would be fine. For something like say an Audi A4 or a Saab 9.3, that sort of size roof, you really need about you want a litre bottle because you don't want to run out halfway through.
You could quite easily use 500ml of that product to
Oh, easily, yes.
Okay, that's something new to me. So you're using quite a lot, guys.
I use quite a lot because I completely saturate it. If you don't use enough, then it's almost worth not bothering because you're just doing the very top. You see a lot of people with these just sort of misting the top, and that's not really doing anything. You really have to saturate and work it through the fibres to get the most benefit out of it.
Perfect. Well, these are the sorts of tips that we want the video to cover, so that's great. And we've also got another sealant here.
Yeah, Fabsil Gold. This is quite a popular one you see people using at the moment. It's cheap. I think it's around about £15 for a litre, and that goes a long way. It's useful because you can put it onto a slightly damp roof as well, so it's not so critical for it to be absolutely bone dry. And it dries fairly quickly. It's somewhere in between these two. I'm on solvent base, so the big benefit on a professional level using I1 is that you can proof a car and an hour later you can drive it away. It's dry and ready to go. Exactly, yeah. Whereas what I used to use, Renovo, used to be a little bit against the clock towards the end of the day. Is it going to be dry in time to go? So that's a big benefit to that. Fabsil dries a little bit slower, but it dries quicker than Renovo, so you want to allow a couple of hours for it to dry completely, or park it outside on a nice breezy summer day and it'll be absolutely fine. What
about durability? You think you could get 18 months potentially out of the Renovo? What about the Gtechniq and the Fabsil?
Same sort of lifespan, to be honest, around about 18 months.
Okay.
As long as you don't add too many shampoos to it when you're washing it and maintaining it. That's why I would say it's important just to dry clean the roof with a hoover in between, because every time you clean it off, every time you add a detergent to it, every time you get it cleaned off with a pressure washer, you're just eating into the life of the fabric sealant. So leaving it alone and letting it do its job is the best way to get the most out of it.
Okie dokie, fantastic. Right, on to the actual application.
Okay, applying these is dead simple. It's just a case of making sure you've got plenty of product on there and working it in with a brush. If you don't work it in, then it's not going to penetrate the fibres as well. So using one of the brushes that we discounted for the cleaning earlier, a nice sort of soft shoe brush, if you like this Colorlock one, or the Kiwi ones you can get from Tesco for buffing your shoes, is ideal for these. It also helps you work any excess product around the roof as well. So, depending on what you're going to use, you can use things like Renovo with a little spray bottle. It's worth putting on just a basic mask for that sort of thing as you're aerosolising it. Aerosolising? One of those words. Or you can apply it with a paintbrush. Okay. So you just work it in with that. For more solvent-based ones, you probably want to wear a bit better mask than that, so something like an FFP3 mask. These are little disposable Silverline FFP3s, or you can go with more heavy-duty 3M jobbies. So you can see it's really wetting it. Just with these, you'll see I've got a little bit of overspray on here, and it's worth nice and early on before it has a chance to set or go anywhere. It's just to
So you
give that a wipe off. It all comes off nice and easily anyway, but it's just...
So always have a clean cloth to hand.
Always have a clean cloth to hand, and then with this, as you can see, we're just going to work it in to the pile. And you see how easily it spreads out. But that's nice and saturated in there now. So you just... You know, it doesn't like we're using a lot with this, but as I say, this is a very short pile roof. You start using this on longer pile roofs and you'll just see the product disappearing in there as you go and not spreading as fast. So I say always have more than you need to hand. There's nothing else. You can do your carpets at the same time and then give them little protections as well. Okay, so that's all applied, so the only thing now is just let that dry off. It's going to go, you can see it's still quite wet at the moment, that will go bone dry to the touch, will go nice darker black. Just try and keep it out of any water and out of the rain until it's ready to go. Okay, last little tip, if you're aerosolising any of these protectants, once you've finished doing that, once the car's all just drying off, it's worth just going around all of the glass just with a glass cleaner and a cloth. Give them a quick clean off just to remove any overspray that's gone on there, because the last thing you want is to be driving down the road just next time you go out and water starts going on there. You can end up with a real smeary mess on there, especially if you're using something like Fabsil, because it's got quite an oily makeup to it. So just give it a quick clean and good to go.
Okay guys, so that procedure shows you how to do a deep clean and then kind of protect the canvas on your roof and it's applying this hydrophobic product to the canvas on top of the sealant. But the point you just made is critical, Ian, isn't it? That just because your canvas isn't hydrophobic doesn't mean that your roof is not protected.
It's not, yeah, it's not protected. Even if, even to the point of the fabric isn't beading off water, it doesn't mean that the fabric sealant that you've just put on there isn't working, because it's still working within the fibre. So it could just be you've got a little bit of dust on the top of it, or it's just faded a little bit over time. It's still going to be working in there, so don't worry if within 6 months your roof is suddenly full of water again, if you like. It's still doing its job.
Yeah.
It's just a case of keeping on top of it when it's dry, and if you give it a top up every year, then it should be fine.
Yeah, so that is like a full deep clean and protect. So then after that, you're just going to dry vacuum it, like you said, before you then go ahead and do your normal wash. And always, it's not all about the beading, but this is going to help to keep your canvas kind of protected and keep it looking nice as well, because this roof now has gone to looking fantastic. So huge thank you to Ian from the UK Detailing Academy. And if you are a professional detailer or a hobbyist detailer, these guys run training courses for everything that you could ever want. So we'll put the information in the description. Once more, Ian, a massive thank you, mate. Really appreciate it.
No worries, good to see you.
Woohoo!
Holding on to what I knew, but the moment's gone. Where was I?